I've always wondered if fate would ever give me a chance to turn the tables. For 25 years, I've been the punchline, the afterthought, the man who wasn't quite good enough. My name is Jeremy Callahan, and at 59 years old, I finally discovered what it means to stand up for yourself, even when the people you're standing up to are family. My wife Tara and I met in college. She was studying business administration while I was working toward my certification in HVAC repair. Not exactly a fairy tale meeting of equals in her parents' eyes. I still remember the first time I met Douglas and Marsha Whitfield, how they sized me up with tight smiles and probing questions about my career aspirations. I told them honestly that I wanted to work with my hands, maybe start my own repair business someday. The light in their eyes dimmed immediately. "How practical," Marsha had said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that would become all too familiar over the years. 25 years of marriage, 25 years of holidays, birthdays, and family dinners where I was tolerated but never truly accepted. Douglas, the retired investment banker, never missed an opportunity to ask about my little repair jobs or comment on what our house might look like if you boys in blue collars learned a thing or two about real money. Marsha was more subtle but equally cutting, always finding ways to mention Tara's old boyfriends who'd gone on to become doctors and executives. I'd swallowed it all, for Tara, for peace, for the family we'd built, until last Sunday. We were hosting the annual spring family dinner, a tradition that rotated between Tara and her siblings' homes. This year, it was our turn. Tara had spent days cleaning and preparing, anxious as always to meet her mother's exacting standards. I'd taken time off work to help, even repainting the guest bathroom and fixing the loose board on the deck that Douglas had pointed out, rather loudly, during his last visit. "I just want everything to be perfect," Tara had whispered the night before, lying next to me in bed. "You know how they get." I did know. I knew all too well. Sunday arrived with perfect spring weather, as if even the elements were trying to impress Douglas and Marsha. Tara's siblings, her brother Michael and his wife Lisa, her sister Carolyn and her husband Paul, arrived first, bringing side dishes and wine. They were easier to be around, though I'd always felt Michael harbored some of his father's judgment about my blue-collar status. Then came the grand entrance. Douglas and Marsha arrived in their Mercedes, Douglas immediately commenting on the neighbor's new boat in their driveway. "Now that's what I call making something of yourself," he'd said, loud enough for me to hear as I grilled steaks on the patio. "Must be nice to afford toys like that." I'd simply nodded and flipped the steaks. 25 years of practice had perfected my ability to let comments like that slide off my back. Or so I thought. Dinner was served on our back patio, the weather too perfect to waste. Conversation flowed as it always did. Douglas holding court about the stock market, Marsha subtly critiquing Tara's landscaping choices, Michael talking about his recent promotion. I mostly stayed quiet, getting up occasionally to refresh drinks or check on the dessert in the oven. It was during one of these kitchen trips that it happened. I was preparing a fresh round of drinks when I heard the sliding door open. Through the reflection in the microwave door, I saw Marsha enter. She didn't notice me standing in the corner of the kitchen, partially hidden by the refrigerator door as I gathered ice. I watched as she approached the counter where I'd lined up the wine glasses. "Which one is Jeremy's?" she muttered to herself, scanning the arrangement. I'd placed mine slightly apart, the only one with red wine instead of white, as I preferred. She spotted it and glanced quickly over her shoulder. Then, with practiced efficiency, she pulled something from her purse, a small vial, and tipped a clear liquid into my glass. She stirred it quickly with her finger, wiped it on a napkin, and headed back outside. I stood frozen, the ice bucket in my hand suddenly heavy. Had I really seen what I thought I'd seen? Had my mother-in-law just drugged my drink? The shock gave way to a cold, clear anger, unlike anything I'd felt before. In 25 years of marriage, I'd suspected many things about Marsha. That she wished Tara had married someone wealthier, that she deliberately excluded me from family decisions. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. I approached the counter and stared at my wine glass. The red liquid looked normal, perhaps slightly cloudy, but nothing obvious. What had she put in there? Something to make me sick? Something to make me fall asleep? Something worse? In that moment, a lifetime of accumulated slights and insults crystallized into a single clear thought. No more. I heard Marsha's voice from the patio. I'm making sure everyone has a special drink. I even prepared something unique for my favorite son-in-law. Her laugh carried through the open window, the same condescending laugh I'd heard for 25 years. But this time, something inside me snapped. With deliberate calm, I moved my wine glass to where Douglas's empty glass had been standing. I poured myself a fresh glass of red wine and placed it where mine had been originally. Then I filled the rest with white wine for the others. Heart pounding, I arranged everything on a tray and headed back outside. Here we go, I said with a smile I didn't feel. Fresh drinks for everyone. I handed them out one by one, saving Douglas's for last. And for you, Douglas, I said, handing him what should have been my glass. What's this? I drink white, not red, he said with a frown. Before I could respond, Marsha jumped in. Oh, Douglas, don't be so rigid. I asked Jeremy to make you something special, a little cocktail I researched. It's supposed to be excellent for men your age. Good for the heart. Douglas harumphed but took the glass. Well, if it's medicinal, he said, taking a sip. Not bad. A bit tangy. I caught Marsha's eye as she smiled triumphantly at me, and I had to look away before my face betrayed me. What had she intended for me? How many times had she done this before? Dinner continued. Douglas, normally so quick with criticisms, grew increasingly quiet over the next 30 minutes. I noticed him blinking rapidly, his hand occasionally rising to his forehead. Are you feeling all right, Dad? Tara asked, noticing as well. Fine, he muttered, his words slightly slurred. Just a little warm out here. 10 minutes later, he attempted to stand and immediately staggered, knocking over his water glass. Michael caught him before he could fall. Whoa there! Dad, what's wrong? Michael's voice was alarmed. Douglas's eyes were unfocused, his speech incomprehensible. Marsha leapt to her feet, her face a mask of horror, but her eyes darted to me, then to the wineglass, and I knew she understood what had happened. Call an ambulance! Tara shouted, already pulling out her phone. Chaos ensued. Douglas was lowered to a patio chair, his head lolling. Marsha was at his side, her face drained of color. What's happening to him? She kept repeating, her voice pitched high with what sounded like genuine fear. But when her eyes met mine across the patio, I saw something else there too. Panic, calculation, guilt. The ambulance arrived within minutes. As the paramedics loaded Douglas onto a stretcher, one of them asked if he'd taken any medication or drugs. Nothing unusual, Marsha responded quickly. Just his regular blood pressure medication this morning. I stood back, watching the scene unfold. Part of me felt guilty. Douglas was in medical distress because of my actions. But another part remembered what Marsha had intended for me. Whatever was happening to Douglas now had been meant for me. Tara turned to me, her face streaked with tears. I need to go with them to the hospital. Can you clean up here and join us later? I nodded and watched as Tara, Marsha, and Michael piled into Michael's car to follow the ambulance. Carolyn and Paul stayed behind to help me clean up, all of us working in shocked silence. As I collected the wine glasses, I noticed Douglas's wasn't quite empty. On impulse, I carefully poured what remained into an empty water bottle and screwed the cap on tight. I slipped it into my pocket, not sure what I planned to do with it, but knowing I needed to preserve the evidence. After Carolyn and Paul left, I sat alone in our suddenly quiet house, turning the water bottle over in my hands. What had Marcia put in that wine? And more importantly, why? I pulled out my phone and called the hospital. After identifying myself as Douglas's son-in-law, I was told he was stable but unconscious. They were running tests. Then I did something I'd never done before. I went to our home office, found the spare key Tara kept for emergencies, and drove to Douglas and Marcia's house. Their alarm code was Tara's birthday, something I'd learned years ago when we'd house sat for them. The house was dark and silent as I let myself in, guilt and determination warring within me. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but 25 years of suspicion and tonight's events had pushed me beyond my usual boundaries. In their bedroom, I found Marcia's bedside table and opened the drawer. Inside were the usual items: reading glasses, hand cream, a novel. But tucked at the back was a small wooden box. I opened it and found several vials similar to what I'd seen Marcia use earlier. They were labeled with dates and initials. My blood ran cold when I saw one marked with my initials from 3 years earlier, the Thanksgiving when I'd become violently ill and had to leave the table. Everyone had blamed the undercooked turkey, but I'd had my suspicions even then. I took photos of everything with my phone, then carefully replaced the box. In Douglas's study, I found nothing unusual until I checked his email. His password, also Tara's birthday, gave me access to correspondence that made my stomach turn. There were emails between Douglas and a private investigator from early in my marriage to Tara. Douglas had been looking for dirt on me, anything to convince Tara she'd made a mistake. The PI had found nothing, but Douglas's emails revealed a depth of contempt for me that was staggering. "Keep looking," he'd written. "A blue-collar nobody like him must have skeletons somewhere. I refuse to accept him as part of this family." More disturbing were the emails between Douglas and Marcia from just last week. "Something needs to be done about Jeremy," Douglas had written. Tara was upset again about his refusal to consider the job offer from my club friend. "He's holding her back, just as we always feared." Marcia's reply chilled me. "Leave it to me. I have a plan for Sunday's dinner. Nothing dangerous, just something to make him look incompetent. Maybe Tara will finally see what we've been telling her all these years." I sat back in Douglas's leather chair, my mind reeling. 25 years of marriage, and my in-laws had been actively working against me the entire time. Not just with disapproving glances or cutting remarks, but with actual plots to humiliate me, to make me ill, to find ways to break up my marriage. And Tara, did she know? Had she been part of this? I refused to believe that. Tara loved me. She'd stood by me, even when it meant disappointing her parents. She'd chosen me, again and again. My phone buzzed, a text from Tara. "Dad awake but confused. Doctor's asking lots of questions. Can you come now?" I pocketed my phone, carefully closed Douglas's email, and left the house exactly as I'd found it. The drive to the hospital gave me time to think, to plan. The water bottle with the drugged wine was in my jacket pocket. The photos of the vials and the emails were on my phone. For the first time in 25 years, I had leverage over Douglas and Marcia. The question was, how would I use it? At the hospital, I found Tara in the waiting room, her face drawn with worry. Marcia was nowhere to be seen. "Where's your mother?" I asked after hugging Tara. "She's with Dad. They're running more tests." Tara's voice was strained. "They think he might have been drugged, Jeremy. They found traces of a sedative in his system." I nodded slowly. "I'm not surprised." Tara looked at me sharply. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "Tara, there's something I need to tell you. But first, I need to know, Have you ever suspected that your parents might interfere in our lives in ways that go beyond just disapproval? Tara's expression changed, her eyes darting away from mine. What are you saying, Jeremy? I saw your mother put something in my wine glass tonight, I said quietly. I switched our glasses. What happened to your father was meant for me. Tara's face drained of color. Number. You must be mistaken. Mom would never. I have proof, I said, pulling out my phone. Not just from tonight. There's evidence she's done this before. And there's more emails between your parents discussing ways to break us up. They've been doing this for years, Tara. Tara stared at me, her expression a complex mixture of disbelief, anger, and something else. Something that looked like a long-buried suspicion finally confirmed. Show me, she whispered. I handed her my phone and watched as she scrolled through the photos I'd taken, her face growing paler by the second. When she reached the emails, she made a small, wounded sound in the back of her throat. All these years, she murmured. All these years, I defended you to them. I told myself they just needed time to accept you, to see what I see in you. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. But they never intended to, did they? They've been actively trying to sabotage us from the beginning. Before I could respond, Marcia appeared in the doorway of the waiting room. She froze when she saw us, her eyes darting between my face and the phone in Tara's hand. Tara, she said, her voice artificially bright. The doctor says your father is stabilizing. They're keeping him overnight for observation, but he's going to be fine. Tara stood slowly, my phone still clutched in her hand. What did you put in Jeremy's wine, Mum? Marcia's facade cracked, just for a moment. Then she rallied. What are you talking about? Your father had some kind of reaction. Stop it, Tara said, her voice eerily calm. I know what you did. Jeremy saw you, and he's shown me the evidence that this isn't the first time. Marcia's eyes flicked to me, hardening with hatred. I don't know what lies he's been telling you. They're not lies, I interrupted, pulling the water bottle from my pocket. This is what's left of the wine you doctored. The wine that ended up in Douglas's glass instead of mine. I'm sure the hospital would be very interested in testing it, especially since they've already found traces of sedatives in Douglas's system. The hospital room fell into a terrible silence. I could hear the steady beep of Douglas's heart monitor, the distant voices of nurses in the hallway. In that moment, I realized how easily things could have gone differently. If I hadn't seen Marcia, if I hadn't switched the glasses, it would have been me lying in that hospital bed, confused and sedated, while my wife worried and my in-laws plotted. The thought made my blood run cold, then hot with a righteous anger I'd suppressed for decades. Marcia's face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, fear, calculation, and finally, a sort of grim resignation. It was just a mild sedative, she said quietly. Something to make him drowsy, maybe say something foolish. Nothing that would hurt him. Nothing that would hurt me, you mean? I corrected, since that's who it was intended for. Tara made a choked sound. How could you, Mom? How could you do something like this? Marcia's expression hardened. You don't understand, Tara. We've only ever wanted what's best for you. Jeremy isn't, he's never been... What? Good enough? Tara's voice rose. Good enough for whom? For you and Dad. Because he's been more than good enough for me for 25 years. He's held you back, Marcia hissed. You could have had so much more. A bigger house, prestigious connections, a husband with a real career. He has a real career, Tara shouted, drawing looks from others in the waiting room. He works harder than Dad ever did, and he's honest and dependable and kind, which is more than I can say for either of you right now. Marcia recoiled as if she'd been slapped. You don't mean that. You're upset. I'm beyond upset, Tara said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I'm horrified. My own parents have been trying to sabotage my marriage for 25 years. You've been drugging my husband. What kind of people are you? A nurse appeared in the doorway. Is everything all right here? We need to keep voices down. Everything's fine, I said quickly. We're just having a family discussion. The nurse looked skeptical, but nodded and withdrew. In the silence that followed, I made a decision. I'd spent 25 years being the bigger person, swallowing insults and bearing slights for Tara's sake. But tonight had shown me that silence wasn't always the right choice. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly, addressing Marcia directly. You're going to tell Douglas exactly what you did when he's well enough to understand. You're going to explain to him that you drugged his drink by mistake and that it was intended for me. You're going to tell him that I know about the emails, about the private investigator, about all of it. Marcia's face crumpled, but I wasn't finished. And then, both of you are going to make a choice. You can either accept that Tara chose me, that I am her husband and have been for 25 years, or you can accept that you won't be part of our lives anymore. You can't keep me from my daughter, Marcia said, her voice shaking. No, he can't, Tara agreed, moving to stand beside me. But I can choose not to have people in my life who would drug my husband, who would actively try to destroy my marriage, who would lie to me for decades. Marcia stared at us, her face a mask of shock and something else, something that looked almost like respect. You don't understand what you're saying. Family is everything. Yes, it is, I said. And Tara is my family. She's been my family for 25 years, despite your best efforts. The question is, are you going to be part of that family or not? For a moment, I thought Marcia might actually be considering my words. Then her expression hardened. This is ridiculous. Douglas will never agree to this ultimatum. We're Tara's parents. We have rights. You have responsibilities, Tara corrected, and you've betrayed them. Mom, I love you and Dad. I always will. But I can't trust you anymore, and I won't subject Jeremy to your tactics. Just then, a doctor appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Whitfield, your husband is asking for you. Marcia looked between us and the doctor, clearly torn. Then she straightened her shoulders. This isn't over, she said quietly, before following the doctor out. Tara collapsed into a chair once her mother was gone, burying her face in her hands. I sat beside her, not touching her, giving her space to process. I knew they didn't approve of you, she finally said, her voice muffled. I knew they thought I could have done better. But this, drugging you, hiring investigators, it's insane, Jeremy. It's criminal. I nodded slowly. The question is, what do we do now? Tara looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. Exactly what you said. They accept you, truly accept you, or they don't see us anymore. It's that simple. But it wasn't simple. Nothing about family ever is. The following week was one of the most difficult of our marriage. Douglas was released from the hospital with no lasting effects from the sedative. Marcia, true to form, tried to minimize what had happened, claiming it had been a simple misunderstanding and that the sedative was merely a natural sleep aid she sometimes used herself. Douglas, when confronted with the evidence of the emails and the PI, first denied everything, then tried to justify his actions as protecting his daughter. It was only when Tara threatened to cut contact completely that the reality of the situation seemed to dawn on him. You would choose him over your own family? Douglas had demanded during a tense meeting at our house 3 days after the incident. He is my family, Tara had replied simply. and you're the ones making me choose. Watching my wife stand up to her parents filled me with a pride I can hardly describe. For 25 years, I'd thought I was the only one making sacrifices for our marriage. Now I realized Tara had been fighting battles I knew nothing about. Eventually, faced with the prospect of losing their daughter and the legal implications of what Marcia had done, Douglas and Marcia grudgingly agreed to our terms. There would be no more interference, no more cutting remarks, no more accidents. And they would treat me with the respect due to their daughter's husband of 25 years. I didn't believe them, of course. People don't change overnight, especially not people like Douglas and Marcia. But something had changed in me. I no longer cared about their approval. I no longer felt the need to prove myself worthy of Tara or her family name. I had stood up for myself, and in doing so, had discovered that I wasn't standing alone. 6 months have passed since that fateful dinner. We see Douglas and Marcia less frequently now. Monthly lunches at neutral locations rather than intimate family gatherings. They're stiffly polite to me, and I return the courtesy. It's not warm, but it's civil. More importantly, Tara and I have rediscovered each other in ways I hadn't anticipated. Without the shadow of her parents' disapproval hanging over us, Tara seems lighter, more carefree. She confessed that she'd spent years trying to bridge the gap between her parents and me, always feeling like she was failing both sides. "I should have stood up to them years ago," she told me one night as we sat on our patio, the same place where everything had come to a head. "I always thought if I just gave them enough time, they'd see what I see in you." "And what's that?" I asked, genuinely curious after all these years. She smiled, taking my hand. "Strength. Not the kind that needs to dominate or impress others. The quiet kind that endures, that builds, that puts others first." I like to think that's true, that there's strength in patience, in taking the higher road. But I've also learned that sometimes standing up for yourself isn't just about you. It's about protecting the people you love from those who would harm them, even family. I don't know what the future holds for us and Tara's parents. Relationships damaged by decades of manipulation don't heal easily or quickly. But I do know this. For 25 years, I allowed myself to be treated as less than I am. I accepted disrespect and condescension because I thought that's what it meant to be part of a family. Now I understand that real family, the kind worth having, doesn't diminish you. It doesn't require you to make yourself smaller or to accept mistreatment. Real family lifts you up, sees your worth, and defends your dignity, even against other family members if necessary. It took a drugged glass of wine and a half-century of life for me to learn that lesson. But now that I have, no one, not even my in-laws, will ever make me forget it again. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever swallowed your pride to keep the peace, or tolerated disrespect from family members who should have supported you, know that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Not with anger or revenge, but with quiet dignity and firm boundaries. Family is precious, but so is your self-respect. Don't sacrifice one for the other. Find the courage to demand both. After all, if I could do it after 25 years of silence, there's hope for anyone. If you're married into a family that questions your worth, protect yourself financially. Keep documentation. Never surrender full control of your assets, and don't underestimate how quickly money and power can turn family into adversaries. What happened to me wasn't just about disrespect. It was about control. The moment I started keeping evidence was the moment I regained that control. If you've experienced similar struggles with in-laws or found the strength to speak up against manipulative family members, leave a comment below. Subscribe to hear more stories of ordinary people finding extraordinary courage in difficult family situations. Remember, your story matters, and your dignity is non-negotiable, no matter who is trying to take it from you.